You mentioned in Marketo since 2012, and data has changed, I think, a lot since
Yes.
2012, and like what you can do with data. So, just in your experience, like when you first started out in this journey into where you are now, how is this data landscape changing and helping or hurting clients to be able to do better marketing?
Yeah. So I think I'm going to actually start with the end of that question and then move backward. When I first got into Marketo, it was all about the program. It was a person source was associated with whether or not a white paper or webinar brought them in, not whether it was Google or what have you, right? Further up funnel. And so it was more simplistic. It wasn't as informed. It wasn't as deep, I think, on the data that you could get, especially from like a B2B perspective. And it wasn't as integrated across so many different channels and platforms and tools that people are using. The connectivity wasn't there. So you had the data you had and you did the best you could with it, right? And as the evolution toward this incredibly complex and almost overwhelming MarTech landscape has evolved, and we've seen the capability to track interaction literally to the inception point of when they find the brand, regardless of whether that ties to their actually becoming known on that particular visit or a year later, right? It means now that the type of data that we're looking at, even when you think about person source, I'm not going to say it's a webinar anymore. I want to say how they got to the webinar. I want to say how they got to the brand the very first time, 10 visits before they finally signed up for the webinar. And so the complexity there and the tools that go along with that complexity are boggling, right? So many of them have so much data and it can be so black box, especially where you're working with a very lean team. They don't know necessarily what they're even looking at, how to interpret it. It's almost too much to digest. And even if you can manage to parse it out, there's still the what does this actually tell me? What actionable items do I actually have off of this data, which is interesting and maybe somewhat informative, but it's not decision driving. And unless you have someone in your organization that knows how to tackle that and take that on, I think a lot of companies buy technology and expect it to do it for them, and then it doesn't happen, and they don't have someone either in-house or out-house, but out of house. That's not a good word. They don't have someone either in-house or externally that can help them navigate that landscape, and so they either don't use the tool, and then they feel like it wasn't the right tool for them, or they are using the tool, but only they could be doing what they're doing on a bicycle, and they bought a Ferrari, right? So I think that there's so much more you can do now, but the possibilities also can be somewhat limiting because you have to be able to actually do those things. And it's a small niche community who actually knows those tools and knows how to do that and can translate those things. And even then, it's still got a little bit of the like soothsayer casting of the bones. If I read the data correctly, it's telling me that we should spend more money in channel Y, right? Like it's still not a perfect science. And there's also not full connectivity across most of the attribution platforms between what's happening really, really, really top of funnel and down. So if you go in and you look at, let's say, Google Analytics, and you're saying, well, these are the total number of visitors I have, there's not a connection point between that and what you're seeing for actual form fills because there isn't, I've yet to discover a platform that natively combines that data into a unified view that really allows you to understand that really, really top of level down conversion as it occurs in most brands. It's just not there yet.